Yes, beautiful people. Hello and welcome again to another episode of What is the Time? A podcast about celestial timing, personal sovereignty, and living where the getting is good. It is your boy Zamboni, your DJ for the affair where we'll be getting down and won't be coming up for air. Thank you so much for being here another time. We're getting ready to figure it out loud again. Today I've been thinking about Uranus in Gemini. Hello and welcome to Uranus in Gemini. For real. We are here. Uranus is out of Taurus for the foreseeable future. It is most of us listening to the or involved in this space, like if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're probably not going to see Uranus in Taurus again. I love that for you. We are... I don't like Uranus in Taurus very much, I don't think. It was... for me, okay, so I can talk a little bit about what's going on in my chart, but if I am really going to be the podcast that I want to see in the world, I got to be real with you. I get so bored when people talk about their own charts. I don't mind reading charts for other people. I don't mind, I love being interested in other people, and one of my favorite things about astrology is letting it, on the assumption that the chart is correct, then if I let the person show me what that chart actually looks like in the world, then I can learn so much about the way that it works and then do better readings. And it's just all very interesting and meaningful for me when I do that. I love that sort of thing. But when other people are just talking about, I find that I don't watch or listen to very much astrology content anymore. And so maybe that's a part of the thing, is that I just don't care to listen to other people talk about astrology very much. I'm not sure why that is. I just find it boring a little bit. That's part of the reason why I started the podcast in the first place, is I didn't want to get pigeonholed into just doing astrology. I think astrology is, I frame it in the same way that I frame it, psychedelic mushrooms or other things like that. The mushroom is not the point. The point is whatever the mushroom shows you. The mushroom is a key that opens a door to the realm of the beyond, the spirit place, or whatever, however you want to conceptualize that. So it's not about the mushroom, it's about the thing that's on the other side of the mushroom. And that's what I feel about astrology also. I think it's really easy to get sucked into all of the fancy math that you can do about astrology, when really astrology is trying to show you something. And if you respect that thing, then you can get a lot of information about how to actually live your life. Anyway, you can leave me a comment if you... Let me know what your opinion is on that. Do you get bored listening to... would you be bored listening to me talk about my chart? Or would you find that interesting? I am genuinely interested what other people might think about that. I have the same thing as other people, where I think that I am normal, I think that I'm like everyone else is, and then I come into contact with other people and I'm like, oh, you live completely differently in a human body also. What are you even talking about right now? So I know that your opinions will vary, and so I'm interested to hear about that. But Uranus in Gemini is a really interesting moment that we're moving into, because Uranus in Gemini is so emblematic of the era of air shift. The era of air is a Jupiter and Saturn phenomenon. So it doesn't necessarily... So to run it down really quick for everyone who might not have heard of that before, the era of air, astrological eras are when Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions happen. They happen every 20 years for a period of 200 years, all in the same element or triplicity. So right now, we are in the era of air, which is to say that we have just begun a 200-year cycle where all of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, which are associated with how we think of what gets to be real in the world, will be all happening in air signs for the next 200 years. So that means Aquarius was the last one, and Gemini and Libra will feature the could you say bi-decadely? That's weird. The every 20-year Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. And so to see that 200-year period kicked off with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini suggests to me that this is likely to be an intensely formative period for how we constitute the way that we think about reality and the power dynamics of that situation. I think about fluid dynamics a lot. You know, like generally we think of fluids as liquid, but gases are also fluid, and probably the reason we don't think about gases is because we can't see them as easily. And so that's a sensory bias problem. That's not rooted in anything real necessarily. You know what I mean? So like the way that fluids move, I think is going to be a really important way to see how power dynamics will take place over this time period. Unfortunately for us, we're coming out of, like for us specifically, like in this generation, we are coming out of Earth, which is much more solid, much more reliable, much more stable, and moving into air and fluid dynamics. We can expect much disruption over a time like this. Like think about the way that my constant analogy here is the pile of leaves that you've raked. You know, as soon as a gust of wind comes, then it's all gone. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. And the things that you thought were a structure that you could climb up or something like that, like that's not real at all. And so there's something that is very democratizing about this. There's something that is very widespread about this in a way that it is not skyscraper style, but rather sand dune style. You know, like you get some stuff and it like some high peaks still but they're more like hills, and they're ever changing. So Uranus in Gemini is a very important point of focus. Uranus in Gemini under a trine from Pluto in Aquarius means that these two are going to be working together very powerfully for a long period of time here. And so Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. I wonder, I haven't looked it up to see if there's going to be another Jupiter-Saturn conjunction while Pluto is in Aquarius. I didn't think to look at that. And was the last one actually while Pluto was still in Capricorn? That might be true. I should look these things up. These are interesting points that I typically operate on vibes, and I should do that way less. I should research things more thoroughly than I do. Shout out to Mel, who researches things so deeply and intensely, and I learned so much from her. And I cannot hang. I am not on this level. So Uranus, but I'm still going to vibe for a little while. So thank you for coming along with me. I've been thinking a lot about the way that, so we are in a moment where power operates in air rather than earth. So we're not looking at mineral resource as the main route to power anymore, but rather air resource. This is interesting. I was just I've been listening to this podcast called Song of Urania, which is a very thorough history of astronomy, mostly like ancient Greek astronomy. And while listening to that, I learned about the style of empire which was on at that period of time. So we're talking about like 200 BC and before. During that time, they had a thalassocracy, which is a kind of empire that doesn't care about land acquisition, but rather seeks to control the sea. The waterways are the most important thing. And so, and I had never really thought about that. I had always thought of empire as conquest for land. And I don't think that you're ever going to get away from land because we are land dwelling creatures. But the idea that the real power play could be somewhere other than land never really computed for me. And even now is difficult for me to conceptualize. That's why I'm figuring it out here, because I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this. But so in a thalassocracy, then you can control the water, which means that you control the merchant flow. We see that going on right now with the Strait of Hormuz in Iran, right? Like they're cutting off the access and it's fucking everything up in the whole world, basically, because it's such a globalized economy, right? So you can control a lot of power by controlling the waterways and, more importantly, the flow of commerce. And maybe not commerce, maybe the flow of mercury, right? So the mercury things are all of not simply commerce. Commerce is a very, like the merce in commerce is the same root word as mercury. They are connected in the same way that merchants are connected to mercury and this kind of thing. But all of the mercury things, which would include data and information and the exchange of those things and narrative and story and law, all of these things, argumentation, language itself, you know, we're coming into like a Tower of Babel kind of moment where like we're about to all speak the same language, because if you can get AI to translate it, then everyone can communicate in a way that has been unprecedented up to now. And they're definitely trying to build a tower. Have you heard about how they're trying to colonize the moon, or they're trying to like mine the moon? This is insane. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that right now. Talking about a thalassocracy and I know that you see where I'm going with this. I'm trying to project that into the air. So we are in a moment of narrative warfare. There's a lot of so if you look at, I know American government stuff more than other stuff in the world, and so I'm just going to use that as the example. I would be very interested to know what happens in China, because they are the major competitor right now. See, the thing is, I don't think that it's going to take over like that. I think that the whole thing is going to spread out because of the air situation. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm going to talk about some U.S. government stuff is what I'm trying to say here. So, the way that American political competitors compete with each other is lawfare primarily. They don't punch each other. They don't shoot each other. They try to catch each other on technicalities in the law and get each other out of power in that way. So the power play is legal. The power play is words. Okay, so then we're also in a moment where you need to control the narrative at all times. So the whole culture wars situation, that is, I don't know, like optimized for by recommendation algorithms for attention seeking tech platforms. They seem like maybe the most important power play of the moment. And so that is the thing that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about, okay, so we got to be Saturn and Aries in this moment, right? So there's the pirate thing that I talk about all the time, which is this sort of rugged independence that doesn't necessarily care about the rules, the traditional, conventional rules, but rather does what is expedient and what is maybe brutally necessary. So, especially if you have like a strong Mars ruling that, then, so how does the pirate navigate? Well, the other thing that that I've been thinking, the other image that I've been thinking of with Saturn and Aries is, okay, so a couple of years ago, I spoke at the Plant Cunning Conference, and I'm actually speaking there again this year. So if you can make it to upstate New York and you want to come hang out with me and a bunch of dope ass herbalists, and they're probably going to play some bluegrass music, which is super dope. Do you know that Isaac slays that shit? I was blown away seeing him play. Anyway, that's going down in July, so you should come through. But so I spoke there 2 years ago, I think, also, and there was a panel that I was a part of, and some people, I forget what teed me up here, but it was like mostly older folks in the space and a few people like, like late 20s, early 30s. And they were, I don't know, like some old folks had been doing some old folk shit, complaining about, the culture war thing. And what I said in that moment was that we younger people do indeed need to respect our elders more effectively. But in order to do that, we need elders who we can respect. And I dropped the mic after that. And in the meantime, I've had some time to think about that. And now that I'm looking at Saturn and Aries, so Saturn is the elder. Saturn is the old, the wise, the respectable, and is fallen in Aries, the space of the youth and the one who, the upstart, the spring shoots, that kind of thing. So Saturn doesn't like this position very much. This is not a natural fit for Saturn. Now, one thing that is worth paying attention to in a lot of cases is that fallen planets or essentially debilitated planets are not bad. They're not good to make talismans with, but in a nativity, they can often show a kind of greatness or excellence because it's a growing edge. It's a thing that's difficult that person has to spend a lot of time and pay a lot of attention to. And so then they, in intentional practice, they get better at a thing than anyone else would have been. So Maya Angelou is my favorite example of that, right? She's got a fallen Mercury retrograde in Pisces conjunct Saturn. Like, it is the most difficult position possible, and she becomes the greatest poet who ever lived or something like that. These are the kinds of situations that can happen in a nativity, and this is well worth remembering. And so if we think about Saturn in Aries, like, you shouldn't make a Saturn talisman during this time period. You missed the boat. You should have did that while Saturn was in Capricorn or Aquarius. You got to wait till Libra now. Sorry, bro. That's just, these are breaks. Go get some Sphere and Sundry. It'll last. It's Saturn. So don't do talismanic magic during this time, but we can. Okay, so what I think of when I think of elders and the lack of respectability that we have in elders, like I look at a lot of the way I've been deeply and intensely frustrated with the elder and ancestor power dynamic for a really long time. There's an unimpeachability to it that is so annoying to me. Elders just outrank you forever. Just all the time, no matter what happens. The elders always can be like, look, like in a more benevolent space, it can be like, hey, I did my best. And then at other times it's like, fuck you, you wasn't there, you don't know, right? And so because of that, you, the younger person, can never say anything. All you can do is just be like, yep, I guess so. And I hate that shit. I hate it so much. And I always come at it and the feeling that I have is, that was your fucking best? You know? Like there's so many times where, you know, children are being abused or abandoned or whatever. It's just like, this was the best you could, this was your best. I don't think that this was your best. I guess, right? I wasn't there. That's the thing. I hate that shit, right? So what I notice in my generation is that the generation before me also did not have respectable elders. And this has been going on for an appallingly long period of time. So this is the thing where if you want to get into ancestor work, you probably don't want to deal with ancestors that are very recent to you. They all were involved in some detestable, you know, slave dynamics and gender dynamics that make you feel weird, and colonialism that makes you feel terrible, and you know, like killing the buffalo, like they tried to kill all of the buffalo. They actively tried to kill all of the buffalo. Like, and everyone is downstream from folks like this, you know? And so you don't want to appeal to those ancestors. They are not well. You appeal instead, when you're doing ancestor magic, you start at least with distant ancestors. We all have ancestors who were indigenous, who had reasonable ways of engaging with a living world, who saw themselves as relations, and who are spiritually well at this point. We all are downstream from that. And so you go back that far. And so when you appeal to your ancestors, you always appeal to the well ancestors, and you sort of like just be like, hey, do your thing. Your job is to heal the lineage, right? So like, do it, please. Here's, you know, whatever offerings I have and attention, and I can be here and facilitate and shit, but like, you need to do your thing. Please, well ancestors, do the wellness thing, right? So the idea that we would have respectable elders when there have been no examples for as long as anyone can remember is like that. It's a strong ask. It's a strong ask. And yet here we are, ain't nobody getting younger. And if the youth are to have elders who they can respect, then we have to be those elders. We have to be the elders who the youth can respect. And so, if we think about Saturn and Aries, Saturn is not well resourced for doing the Saturn things. Saturn in Aries is the 2-year-old emperor who is not a reliable emperor, but whose elders are dead. And so this is what you've got. This is what you've got to deal with. We are that. And so this is a moment for us to actively lean into what would it take to be an elder who is worthwhile. So what is an elder who would be worthwhile? Elders offer wisdom and guidance. So they are people who know the game. I always like to say that the most important question is, what is it? Because if you can figure out what the thing is, what the pattern is, what the object is, what the moment is, then you can accurately predict outcomes and leverage its shape toward your advantage. So elders are those who know the game and who can effectively bring good outcomes out of youth. So that can look a lot of ways, and that doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel nice. So I'm not necessarily asking for elders to be nicer to us, although they could do that on lots of occasions. But it's not always going to feel that way. Like, think about a coach. A coach doesn't let you just be a dumbass. A good coach has high expectations of you and pulls your best performance out. These are the elders that we need. So, how do we do that in the land where we are? Well, so part of the problem is that no one knows the game. We are living in unprecedented times with unprecedented technology that is surely accelerating, at least during Uranus and Gemini. It's probably not going to accelerate the whole time we're like the era of air, but the whole 200 years, I doubt we'll see exclusively acceleration during that 200-year period. But I'm going to think that probably for the next 7 years or so, and maybe 20 for Pluto and Aquarius, we're going to see some solid acceleration. Solid is maybe the wrong word there. Because it's going to be wildly destabilizing. And that's the point here, is that it's destabilizing and nobody knows the game. So what do we do with that? We're, rocking a hard place with it a little bit, right? So let's think. So if we think about the way that I like to think about this actually is, so the world is made of what the world is made of. In Exodus, the Lord reveals himself to Moses and with the burning bush and shit. And so Moses goes over and he like, and God's like, hey, you're gonna go and do this hard thing. And Moses is like, I don't like this plan. And God's like, well, too bad, I'm God and you're gonna do it. And he's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna do what you're telling me to do, like, I need you to tell me who you are. Who are you? And God says, I am. And so there's something there about the isness of everything. The thing that am is the thing that always am. I also like to think about this in the Taoist sense, like the way, right? Not a singular object, but rather a process. It's a flow model. Like the thing is always dynamically changing. And so, but it is always dynamically changing according to the principle, the like singular principle for how things go. Like the way is the way, and nothing ever is outside of the way. Everything only happens in the way that it could happen in the world. So, for example, if you are going to have a God experience, then some neurochemical shit is going to happen in your brain that's going to make you feel that way. These are the same thing. You can't have like, so you can do that. You can induce it with a drug, for example, or by, yeah, like, so if you drink a tea and it makes you feel that way, such as ayahuasca or something like that, then that is going to reliably change your neurochemistry and therefore reliably give you the feeling of seeing God. You can have a divine experience in that way. However, I also posit that during a what haters would call a genuine spiritual experience, still during that, you are going to have the same neurochemical response, because if you feel that way, then the neurochemistry is present at the same time. So in order for you to feel things, then you need a certain neurochemical setup for that to happen. That is the way that it operates, right? So the way am always. So then, if we're moving into unprecedented times, but we can reliably understand that the way am always, then this is good news. That means that we're going to still be able to rely on our patterns. And this is why I like the idea of aphorisms, wives' tales, and such for getting operable understanding of how the world operates and what I should be doing in it. Okay. So we know that the way am, and we know that we can rely on aphorisms, wives' tales, fairy tales, and other patterns, myths, in order to get our understanding of the world and leverage it toward better outcomes. And so our unprecedented times, let's think into that for a little bit. So the technology at this moment, and so what is tech? Tech is like stuff that we do. It's like tools and information together. I resist all of these definitions because, well, the definitions resist me, and so I'm just tired of them. But so if we think about AI, there are a couple of things that we need to think about. One is that AI is much more than simply LLMs, because if we simply must include at least recommendation algorithms, but then there's other stuff also. And then The other thing that we need to think about is how, let's take the example of the LLM. It does things that people don't know how to predict. That to me feels like it has crossed into the space of being a complex system rather than simply being a complicated system. So the difference between a complicated and a complex system is a complicated system is inherently knowable by engineers. So a complicated system, like your phone, for example, is a complicated system. Yes, there's a lot happening. There's a lot going on there, but every component of that is understood by someone. This is different than a river, which is a complex system. It does things that people can't possibly predict because there are too many variables involved. Here I'm back to fluid dynamics again. No one knows exactly how to, like, there is not a mathematical theorem that has been worked out by people that would predict how fluids move because there's too much going on. There's too much information about it. There's too many inputs that just confuse everybody, and so we're just not able to take all the things into account. So this is like, think about if you were in the woods trying to do a science experiment, and so you've got your like instruments, let's say a camera, pointed at the thing, and then before you get any good information, then a tree falls on your camera. Like, there was no good way for you to know that was what was going to happen. Like, you were looking at something else. You were thinking like the forest has so many things going on in it at all times that you can't predict all of the things that are going to happen. Or some ants come and they end up moving rocks underneath your camera stand and your camera falls over. Like, you had no way of knowing that this is where the ants were going to be today. You know what I mean? It's outside of your scope of understanding. So the world is made up of nested complex systems. I think of complex systems as being alive. They are up to whatever they are up to. And they just are gonna do that all the time. So our bodies are complex systems. It's impossible to understand everything that goes on inside the body. The body just does what it does. And each of the organs inside of the unified whole of the body is itself a complex system. And if we think of my body as well as participating in the environment that I live in, the environment, let's say the forest or the town or whatever else, is a complex system. And so we live in nested complex systems. Okay, so I have this feeling that AI has moved into the space where it is a complex system and not a complicated one. That is to say that the people who made it, the same way that people made phones, the people who made the AI cannot accurately predict what it's going to do. And because of that, because there are too many inputs inside of the system, that everybody calls it a black box or whatever, right? There's too much going on there for people to accurately predict, and it is therefore into the space of complex systems. And if we think of complex systems as alive, which is what I think we should do, because I think we should think of rivers as alive, I think it's reasonable to think of cities as living entities unto themselves. I think it's reasonable to consider the earth as a living entity unto itself. So, and on and on. I think that is as reasonable a definition of life as anything else is. Then, that is interest. All right. So, but still the way am. So the rules that govern, or we could say the way that governs complex systems, still am the way that governs information data systems, artificial intelligence, as it actually operates in the world, as it actually exists. Okay. So I have not answered my question about how the pirate operates in the sea of recommendation algorithms, because you run into so the problem that you run into, that I have run into, is, so when I started doing when I started like, so when I was in college, everybody got on Facebook, and it was all happening on Facebook, and I could just see that people were getting glued to the Facebook page, and I was like, "This is gross and weird, and I don't want anything to do with it." And so I didn't do it at all. And my brother's wife, who I disagree with at basically every turn, was on there, and she made an astoundingly good point, which was, if you aren't on there and everyone else is on there, then who are you going to hang out with? And I hate how right she was about that. It is, I hate that that is so true, but it is so true. And that is something that we need to take into account. So now I'm on social, and because I like do my astrology stuff there, and I do all that, like, this is, I live in the space just like everyone else does. So because everyone else does, this is, if this is where the people are, then I need to be here as well. So the idea of opting out of recommendation algorithms is a kind of, I don't know, primitivist utopian dream that seems unsustainable, and at very least is not going to be taken up by the masses, by large groups of people. And so I don't see that as a super viable option. So we have to be inside it. We have to deal with the recommendation algorithms. Can you program it? Well, you gotta know what it is. And what it is trying to suck you into a rabbit hole that will keep your attention, and it really wants you to pay attention to the big thing. It wants the things. So there is a pretty wide diversity of things that will captivate attention, but they, in each of those subdomains, there is a front runner. I guess we could think about the Pareto principle here a little bit. This idea that, like, 20% of the stuff goes to 80%. 80% of the stuff goes to 20% of the like players, individuals. So recommendation algorithms are trying to optimize. They know that, and so they're trying to get you to pay attention to the sort of tried and true thing. And so I guess there might be a question about like resisting that. Is it worth trying to resist that? I guess there's a question about what you're trying to do. Well, so, because goals make demands, right? So, which is to say that there is never a right or wrong thing to do because moral relativism is a thing, right? So, it's the idea that if you are watching a documentary and like a animal documentary and you see a bear eating a salmon. If it's a documentary about bears, you love this. If it's a documentary about salmon, you hate this. That principle that drives that good and evil is in operation at all times in every dynamic that ever existed in the world. So things that are good for me are not necessarily good for everyone in the world. I kill things and eat them all the time, but that is the way. So there never can be a right or wrong thing or a good or bad thing. However, if you are trying to do a thing, that is to say you have a goal, then you need to make sure that your actions lead to the outcome that you want. That is to say that goals make demands. So my favorite example of this is the internal combustion engine. So if your car isn't starting, then you don't just get to feel it out on vibes and just do whatever you feel like doing because what you want is the car to start. There is a thing that you should do in a particular order that you should do it. There are very strict rules. There is a right way to do this thing. And then if you do it right, then the car will start. If you don't do it right, then the car will not start. Your goal of getting the car to start has made a demand on the precise procedure that you are to follow, right? So your goal is making a demand on you. What was I talking about? Recommendation algorithms. What is the goal of the pirate's interaction with the recommendation algorithms? To participate in a way that two options creates the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, or creates the world that I want. That's the difference between value and quality a little bit, right? And also, kind of, it's the difference between what I want versus what other people want. So, insofar as what I want comes into conflict with what other people want, I'm still rooting for me, so I'm going to do the thing that I want. So when I'm interacting with the recommendation algorithm, sometimes what I want might not even be the thing that creates the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, but that is good for me in some capacity. That's real pirate thinking there. That's not priest thinking, that's pirate thinking. But, okay. So recommendation algorithms. So trying to interact with recommendation algorithms in a way that makes at least my world better, but maybe creates the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. So, is this an argument for, like, trying to, like, leaving it on when you go to the store on a channel that you think is good and would benefit the people, benefit other people seeing it, and so you try to artificially improve the algorithm for someone else? That's a move. I don't know. This is something that I'm not going to solve today, but is something that I am thinking with, and that as we navigate narrative warfare throughout this time, like the whole thing about like all of the culture war stuff, the gender wars and there's this idea that there's some kind of race war going on right now or something like this, and like I don't think that it needs to be all that. And I don't think that that is the way that most people live and in it, like actually interact with each other. And insofar as we do, we don't necessarily have to. But we do because that's where our thinking is. So there's something here about, like what I was saying last time about, can I pull my values toward my morality? So can I pull my choices toward things that I think are good? I wonder if there would be a way to cultivate a recommendation algorithm that would do that. Probably not, because you're not in charge of it, right? I'm not sure. This has probably been enough meandering for now. Thanks for hanging out. I didn't plug it before, but you should go to zen1point.com. There's you go get a reading. Or if you don't feel like getting a reading and you just want to send me money, you're welcome to do that too. I love you. Bye.